welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we are up to chapter 47. I can't wait to get into this one, so let's jump right in. Okay. Despite the rain and the worsening seas, life had delivered them safely to the small jetty which jutted out from a sheer cliff face. Squinting, Talyn could just make out a narrow gap in the cliff at the end of the jetty, and what looked like a path heading to a steep stairwell clinging to the side of the cliff face. Perched high above on a rocky outcropping was a house shrouded in darkness and rain. As far as she could tell, the rest of the cliff top was covered in trees. The retreat was isolated. Perfect territory for an assassination attempt by a skilled and well-prepared squad, especially once they realised it would be too difficult to try and sneak into the palace without being seen. It would only be a matter of patience and waiting until their target came out here. The wolves clambered out onto the rain-soaked wood behind Talyn. Lifer stayed in his boat, eyes tracking them as they ran along the jetty. She'd forgotten about him by the time they reached the wet sand at the base of the cliff and started straight up the stairs. The rock was uneven and slippery from the rain, the darkness making it hard to see the way properly. Talyn leapt into the air without being asked, hovering close in case one of them slipped and fell. At the top, they were greeted with a narrow paved path leading in the direction of the house, though the structure wasn't visible through the thick trees. Talyn landed, wings furling at his sides, and began walking along the path, but Talyn stopped him, motioning for the wolves to gather around her. "We need to scout the area before we go charging in blindly. Follow me and try not to make any noise." They nodded without hesitation. She tried not to fear for them. If there was indeed an assassination team here, one of them could get hurt. Ruthlessly, she shoved that fear away, along with the fear that she might not be up to this anymore either. Whether or not she was doing it anyway. Some core part of her simply wouldn't let her do otherwise. She stepped off the path and began moving through the dripping forest, heading in the general direction of the house she'd spotted at the top of the cliff. Slowly the trees thinned, and the house came into sight, a dim outline against the night sky, 3 stories high and surrounded on 3 sides by a wide veranda. An area the size of an Malaya field had been cleared around the house, perfectly manicured lawn lit by the watery light of a moon mostly obscured by clouds. Shit. "You won't be sneaking up on that house," Sari offered helpfully. Talyn knelt behind the tree line and the wolves followed suit without a word. For a long time they watched the house, rain pattering around them. Some of the tight anxiety in her stomach loosened when nothing moved. There were a handful of lights on inside, but the house was mostly dark. It was well after midnight and likely everybody was abed. There were no unusual sounds above the rain. Then Talyn stiffened. Talyn's heart thudded when he pointed to a shadowy figure that appeared from around the left side of the house, swung up onto the veranda roof and crouched there, as if waiting. Talyn's winged folk vision had been the first to catch it. "Shit," Samuel cursed in a whisper. "Do you think they're already inside?" "Could it be one of the guests?" Corin asked. "Climbing onto the roof?" Samuel hissed back. "Prince Cuinn would only have winged folk with him," Theak said quietly. "They wouldn't need to be climbing onto the roof. And any human servants in there wouldn't be either." "Theak's right," she was reassured by his quick analysis. Theak knew what he was doing, and she had to allow herself to rely on that. The better question is, where did he or she come from? We've been here a half-turn and nobody has come past. "They must have climbed the cliffs to the south," Helen's voice rumbled. "Then they were out there on a boat too," Corin's voice was full of dread. "We're lucky we didn't run right into them." 30 warriors. A cold chill shivered through her. 30 assassins, and she had herself and 5 wolves. All she could hope was that the Shadowhawk's information had nothing to do with what was happening. That this was something else entirely. "Can you make out where the others are, Talyn?" Talyn asked, shaking her head as Zamrel went to open his mouth. "The person on the roof is a lookout, watching for anyone approaching the front of the house. You don't have a lookout unless there's more than one of you." "I can't see anything else," Talyn responded a moment later. "They might still be climbing the cliffs," Theak said in an undertone. "They're setting themselves up. It's what I would do if I were planning an attack here." Talyn's eyes never stopped, constantly roving the area before them. "I'm going to go in first and take out their observer. We go in quiet through the front, delay how long it takes them to learn we're here. We're probably facing superior numbers, so we pick them off one by one if we can," Zamrel nodded. She glanced at him. "Exactly. Talyn, do you know where Prince Cuinn's bedroom will be?" A firm nod from the winged man. "3rd floor, eastern side, corner suite. I've been here before." "Good. Once the observer is dead, Talyn, I want you in the air covering the others as they cross the open ground to the front door. You see anything move on them and you shoot to kill. Understand?" His gaze met hers steadily. "I will." Anxiety tore at her. They could already be in the house, already making for Cuinn's room. But if she made a mistake here and rushed in, they'd all die along with Cuinn. She took a breath. Once we're in, Theak, you and Zamrel go straight for Prince Cuinn. Don't stop for anything. Extinguish any lamps in his room and keep him still and quiet. Corin and Halun, stay together but spread through the ground floor of the house and take out anyone you come across that has a weapon. I'll do the same with the second floor. From there we move up to the third, clear it on our way to the prince's room. And me? Talyn asked. You stay up high in the air. Shoot anyone armed who comes running out here or follows us in. I'm assuming Cuinn has friends staying with him. If any of you come across them, or any servants still awake, tell them to stay in their rooms and barricade the door. Any questions? They shook their heads one by one. Talyn sensed their nervousness, but also their determination. If you get caught and you need help, remember the whistle I taught you. Don't hesitate to use it. She paused, talking to herself as much as them. Things will get chaotic and scary in there, and when that happens, just go with your training and your instincts. Take a deep breath, relax as best you can, and all those endless hours of training will take over. We'll be all right, Captain, Theak nodded. Now go. Talyn rose to her feet and rounded the house, not leaving the trees until she was directly east of the veranda. Then she dashed out, running low and keeping to the shadows. Nothing moved on the roof. One light step up onto the veranda and she paused, utterly still, making sure there wasn't anyone else around. Nothing moved. As she'd suspected, the man on the roof was the front sentry, meaning the others were probably still coming up the cliffs and in through the back. Once confident she was alone, her eyes turned to the section of the roof where the lookout was crouched. Her right hand reached for her sai. She pulled it silently from the sheath, balanced it in her hand, then moved into a light run, her feet touching the wooden veranda floor without sound. Judging her move with instinct born of years of training, she launched herself upwards, right arm extended. The sai she gripped in her left hand slid through the thatched veranda roof, deadly sharp, and into the chest of the man who crouched above. He didn't make a sound as he died, and it had been as easy as breathing. Talyn landed lightly, sheathing her bloody sai and making a sharp gesture to the wolves watching from the trees. Talyn was a blur of movement as he launched himself into the night sky. The others emerged from the trees at a run, but Talyn didn't wait before going to the door and pushing it slowly open. Her eyes scanned the interior, a lounge area, lit by a dying fire. The slight click from the shadows in the corner of the room was all the warning she got. Talyn launched into a run, at the same instant summoning her bright sapphire energy shield. The energy drain was immediate, slowing her steps a fraction. 2 crossbow bolts zoomed towards her and sizzled harmlessly into the shield. Before he could reload, she was across the room and moving into the darkness beyond where the crossbowman crouched, bow aimed at the front door. Along with the copper mask covering his face down to his mouth, he wore all black. Another lookout. Whoever they were most definitely professionals. An interesting detail to think on later. Right now she was more interested in removing the threat they posed to her charge. As the shooter hastily tried to reload, she stepped in and drove the point of her sai into his throat. A clean, silent kill. Withdrawing the sai, she straightened, a distant part of her thoroughly relieved the man had been firing a crossbow, not a bow and arrow. There'd been no telltale hiss to send her spiraling into a panic. A sound behind her had her spinning, sai raised, but it was just the wolves coming through the front entrance. Zamrel and Theak headed straight up the staircase to the left of the door, weapons drawn but moving as quietly as she taught them. She stepped back into the light, then gestured sharply to Halun and Corin. The young man's eyes widened at the sight of the dead man at her feet. Another lookout, she murmured. He was here to kill anyone coming through the front door. There are likely to be more, so move quietly and check every room before you enter it. We will. Corin was pale, mouth in a tight line. Go, Captain. They might already be upstairs. She nodded and left them, running back through the lit room and taking the stairs that Zamrel and Theak had disappeared up. If the assassins were coming through the back of the house, then there must be a second staircase. The lookout position at the front stairs likely there to stop anyone surprising the attack team from the front. On the second floor landing she paused, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dimness. A long corridor stretched ahead and to her left, both dark, both holding a series of closed doors. She took the one straight ahead. She tensed as she approached the end of the hall where it intersected with another that ran the length of the back of the house. She was 5 steps from reaching it when 2 masked figures appeared from the right, padding on silent feet, swords held ready. They saw her quickly, catching her movement in their peripheral vision, but she didn't stop her forward momentum, lifting her right side to catch the swinging blade of the closest swordsman. A practiced twist of her wrist yanked the sword from his hand, and left his torso momentarily open. In a breath, she'd stepped into him and buried her second sigh in his heart. As he dropped, she stepped away from the other man's lunge, sheathed her remaining sigh, and ducked down to sweep up the fallen sword in one movement. Her attacker followed, pressing her further back down the hallway with a series of controlled slashes. She parried each of them, then shoved his blade to the side before swinging back and slicing the tip of her sword through his neck. His hands rose to his ruined throat as he fell. Blood sprayed in a wide arc. Warm droplets of it spattered over her face and hands. It was over in seconds. She was breathing hard, muscles trembling, the burst of adrenaline keeping her on her feet. She kept the sword, yanked her other sigh from the dead man's chest, and went to the other end of the corridor. Several paces to her right was the landing for the second stairwell. 2 more swordsmen were coming up at a run, clearly alerted by the sound of fighting. At a shout from below, they veered sharply to each side of the staircase. Another crossbow twanged, and several bolts came flying up the stairwell at her, directly between the 2 swordsmen. Swearing, Talyn summoned her shield, slamming it into place. Both swordsmen hesitated, shock flaring in their eyes at the sight of her shield. Then the sound of fighting from below, the thump of a knife hitting flesh, Halun's low growl. "We've got the shooter, Captain!" Corin called up, voice admirably steady. "You're clear!" She dropped the shield, heart thudding at the effort it had taken, before turning her focus to the first assassin to reach the top of the stairs. She lashed out with a booted foot, sending him tumbling back down the way he'd come. "Incoming!" she shouted, even as she ducked under the second man's swing and ran her sword through his chest. A loud echoing whistle sounded, Zamrel, from somewhere above. Leaving the sword impaled on the dead body, she spun and took the stairs up to the 3rd floor at a sprint. The whistle came again as she reached the landing, from one of the rooms at the end of the corridor, the eastern suite, like Talyn had said. Talyn ran, sprinting down the corridor at top speed, then shouldered her way through the double doors of the room at the end. A sigh in each hand, she surveyed the scene, looking for her charge. Cuinn was in the corner of the room to her right, chest bare, golden hair in disarray. A winged woman crouched naked behind him, wrapped in the bedsheet. All 3 arched windows were open, shutters swinging out in the breeze. Theak and Zamrel stood between Cuinn and 3 masked attackers. 2 bodies already lay bleeding on the floor. Theak's axe and Zamrel's sword were dripping blood, and both men breathed hard. "They came through the windows!" Theak shouted unnecessarily. 3 masked heads shifted her way. They glanced at each other. One moved on her. She killed him before he could take a step at the throw of her sigh. Zamrel's blade flicked as the thief took advantage of his opponent's distraction, disarming the man and opening up his throat. The 3rd hesitated, then moved on Cuinn. Talyn's second sigh took him in the back. "Are you all right?" Talyn snapped at Cuinn as she moved quickly to retrieve her sighs. He nodded. Zamrel and Theak arrived just as they burst through the windows. "Unlocked, were they?" she snapped, then dismissed him before he could respond and looked at Theak and Zamrel. "You 2 okay?" "A few cuts, nothing serious," Zamrel said, then looked at the dead bodies, his skin pale and spattered with drying blood. "Killing's a rather messy business, isn't it?" Theak gripped his arm. "You don't ever get used to killing, and that's the way it should be." "Is the prince okay?" Corin appeared in the doorway, panting. His hands were splattered with blood and gore, but a determined light shone fiercely in his green eyes. Halun was behind him, axe slick with blood and brain matter. He too was a grisly sight. They'd killed more than just the crossbowmen below. Pride flared briefly in her chest. Her wolves hadn't faltered. They'd fought. For now, she nodded briskly. "Is the ground floor clear?" "We took out the shooter and the man you kicked downstairs, plus another 2 creeping in through the kitchen. But then we came as soon as we heard the distress signal, so we didn't get a chance to clear the whole ground floor." Corin spoke quickly, words falling over each other. She did a quick count in her head. "That's what, 10 dead? I'm betting there's a second wave out there somewhere, if not already in the house." "Sorry?" It didn't matter that her partner wasn't physically present, not now when her charge's life was in the balance. "A good possibility. Plan for it," she said. "They know where Cuinn is, so first thing to do is get him away from there." Talyn nodded, faces the wolves. "First we get the prince out of this house. If there are more, they'll be coming straight at this room." She was bitterly regretting not telling Ravnia where they were going as she glanced around, eyes falling on the open windows. "We'll go out the windows, make straight for the cover of the forest. Once clear, we'll plan where next. Halun, you first. Go!" The big man didn't protest, making straight for the windows. "What about my friends staying here?" Cuinn demanded suddenly. "We're just going to abandon them?" She gave him a flat look, motioning for Zamrel to follow Halun out. "Yes, your life is our priority and we can't save everyone. Besides, the assassins are after you, not your friends. Hopefully they'll be left alone." "Hopefully? That's not good enough." He was upset. She found it both annoying and surprising. When had he ever displayed a shred of caring about anyone else? Too bad, she said, ice cold. Maybe if you'd let us bring a full guard here, we could protect more people. Now out the window. Stick close to the wall and don't leave Halun's side until we're all down. His mouth thinned, but he did as she asked, wings rustling as he leapt after the other two. Theak went next, then Corin, Talyn shooting anxious glances at the doorway, expecting more assassins to burst through at any moment. But none came, and then she was out, shimmying down the drain pipe to land in the damp soil. It was dark in the shadows by the house, and she relaxed a little. Hopefully they were staying ahead of the game, doing what their adversary wouldn't expect. Now what? Cuinn asked, irritation colouring his voice. He kept glancing up at the house, whether to see if they were being followed or out of concern for his friends. She couldn't tell. Halun leads, you directly behind. We stick to the shadows, over to the servants' quarters there, she pointed. Then stick close to the shadows by the building and a short dash into the forest by the cliffs. You don't stop for anything. Am I clear? Crystal, Captain. Go! She scanned the skies for Talyn as they ran, but the sky was cloudy and the rain didn't help visibility. Ignoring worries, she kept pace behind the others as they scrambled for the servants' quarters, then inched along the southern wall before sprinting over to the trees. She didn't take a proper breath until they were inside the dripping forest without any shouts of alarm coming from behind them. Theak, thoughts? She snapped. He looked up. We could go for the cliff path and head out onto one of the family's private boats. Your Highness, do you know where they're stored? I do, Cuinn nodded. Strangely enough, the prince didn't look afraid, just shocked by the attack. There's a path down the southern cliff face, not far from here actually. It leads to a private beach and the boathouse. Talyn opened her mouth to agree, but a faint screeching cry caught her attention. It sounded familiar, something she'd heard before. But where? Sari answered before she could recall. Tal, that was a Neva. What? In her shock, she spoke the words aloud. That's impossible. What would a Neva be doing here? Captain! None of them had noticed her muttered words. Their gazes were fixed on the southern horizon, just out beyond the cliffs, where a small cluster of dark flying shapes was headed straight for the house. Neva flies, she breathed. Another screech sounded, closer this time, another quickly following on its tail. The cries held an edge of anticipation, of hunger, and she'd heard it from Neva flight before from Nevas flying into battle. What in the sodding flea-bitten shits is a Neva flyer? Theak barked, losing a hint of composure for the first time. She ignored him, her eyes instantly going to the skies over the house, heart pounding in growing terror. The skies where Talyn was, where she'd told him to stay. Nevas would tear a winged man to shreds in seconds. Theak reached out and bodily hauled her back as she went to run out into the open. What are you doing? The sharp movement jolted some clarity back. If she ran out into the open, she'd be flagging Clun's location for anyone present. The same if she shouted for Talyn. They're flying creatures, a bit like bats, but much bigger, she said, failing to hide the dread in her voice. Firthlanders ride them in battle, archers, like our Skyriders, only ours are eagles, but I don't understand why they'd be here. Doesn't matter, Samuel snapped. Talyn's up there. No, he's not, a musical voice sounded behind them. He saw you all creeping out of the house and followed. As one, they spun to watch Talyn step out of the trees behind them. The utter relief that filled the space was palpable enough Talyn thought it might be possible to cut it with a knife. He gave them an odd look, but then waved a hand. Anyway, no time for chat. I've been scouting the area. There are more of them waiting down by the boat shed. I almost missed them in the dark. They're hiding, waiting to ambush you, I'd say. Then we'll... Nope, there's more. Another 20 at least. They're on horseback and combing the forest from the north. It won't be long before they stumble across us. Plus those things. Corin pointed her hand at the Neva flyers, now rapidly approaching the house. Talyn took a breath. All their potential escape routes had been cut off. And if anyone tried to fly, well, those Neva flyers weren't out here in the rain for no reason. They were trapped. Okay, that's the end of chapter 47. I'm sorry to leave you there, but I promise chapter 48 will be up soon. As always, if you want to avoid spoilers, please jump out now. And I promise I will be back soon with chapter 48. And I really look forward to seeing you then. But if you'd like to stick around for some author commentary, let's do that now. Ooh, what a chapter! Okay, so this is my second favourite scene of the entire book to write. Chapter, I should say. The third favourite being the moment of the break-in at the Citadel when Talyn launches into action. And my second favourite being this entire scene. Where to start, I guess. The wolves arrive at the retreat. essentially just as the assassination attack plan is launching into action at the same time. So Talyn, despite her fears about her capabilities and her rust and all the rest of it, when she stops thinking and reverts to her instinct and her experience and her training, her competence is on full display here. And this is what I love so much about writing this chapter. I love writing action scenes in general. They're always the most fun to write for me. But in this instance with Talyn in particular and the journey that she's been on through this book, writing her actually displaying what she's capable of is so much fun. She splits the wolves up. She gives them clear roles. She moves into the house with a strategy. She doesn't go in recklessly. She waits that extra few minutes that she needs to make sure that they don't run in blindly and that they don't make things worse. And in the end, that results in success. So she takes out the 2 sentries in a very cool way. Of the way she kind of sneaked up onto that veranda and just stabbed the dude through the roof. Very cool. And then gets into the house, hears the bow, the crossbow bolt, and launches that energy shield that Talyn warriors all have. Talyn's being a dark sapphire color to stop those bolts and then kill that sentry. And then the wolves are in the house and moving into motion. Everyone holds up their training without faltering. Every single one of the wolves, Zamaral and Corin, have, I think, or more obviously show at least their response to the fact that they've killed people and there's blood and gore everywhere, and they certainly register that. But even as they're registering that in that moment, they are holding tight to the training, their discipline, the muscle memory of what Talyn's been teaching them over and over again for the past few months, and they shine incredibly. And she has that moment up in Cuinn's room to feel that pride for how they're performing. But they're in a pretty dire situation. She's furious as hell at Cuinn, who's went out there without guards, who left his windows open and is now complaining about the fact that they're going to leave his friends behind. She's been pretty brutal in that moment, but from the perspective of a Kingshield guard, their one and only responsibility is to get the Demnoric's family member to safety, and that is what she's adhering to the letter. The friends are going to have to be on their own, and as she said to him, maybe next time he should think twice about not having a guard when he travels. And there's also the logic that the assassins are presumably after Prince Cuinn, not his friends, and therefore they will likely be left alone. So they head out, they get Cuinn out of immediate danger, just in time, and get him into the safety of the forest, and all seems to be going well, except then Tearslon drops out of the sky to let them know that there are more waves of attackers, cutting off both their exit points, and then Talyn hears the Neva flyers on the night sky, in the night air, screeching as they come in off the ocean towards the house. Now, spoiler alert, as we know, these Neva flyers are Tarkos's. Tarkos is working with Vengeance. Vengeance is trying to take out who they thought was going to be Queen Serana. We find out in a few chapters Queen Serana was supposed to be at the retreat, not Cuinn. Cuinn decided to go at the last minute. So this was not necessarily an attack directed at Cuinn, but at Serana. Their weapons were for Vengeance, the Vengeance assassination attack, and Talyn's logic is correct. They tried the reconnoitering, the break-in at the Citadel. They got to a certain distance, infiltrating the Citadel before being caught, and decided strategically that the better option would be wait until the royals head out to their isolated retreat on an island, unprotected in relation to the Citadel, and stage the attack there, which is a pretty good idea. And then Neva flyers are a counter to the Falcon's main advantage, which is that they can fly. Now, a Neva flyer is similar in size to the eagles that the Twin Throne Skyriders ride. They're massive. They're bat-like, and they're a little bit more vicious and cold than the eagles are. And these Neva flyers are part of Tarkos's kind of rebel element. The warlord of Firthland doesn't currently aware exists or has heard rumors, but doesn't really know the extent of the problem that he has amongst his Neva flyer cohort. So anyway, they are trapped in the trees, no way out, and it's only going to get better from here. So if you have any questions or comments about this chapter, like I said, fight scenes, action scenes are my favorite. They're the most fun, and this scene, the whole bit from Talyn taking out those sentries to killing the assassins in the house with relative ease, like living up to her Talyn potential, was so much fun, and it's so much fun to unleash Talyn in that way. But yeah, if you have any questions or comments about that or about anything else in this chapter, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to answer. Otherwise, I'll see you very soon, I promise. It won't be long, a couple of days, and chapter 48 will be up. And that is my favorite scene that I wrote in this entire book, and I'll tell you about that in the next author commentary. All right, have a great day, guys.